So when you watch television, you'll see people like Paul and I and
talking heads.
But there's a lot of people behind the scenes at television stations that you'll never see or know or even get their name. But we want to introduce you to a very special one, a very important one, who's been in the business for 3+ decades.
That's a long time.
It is. His name is Lloyd Wright, and he works right here at WFYI. Come and meet him.
You're going to be on TV now, Lloyd.
We are spending a little bit of time in Mr. Wright's neighborhood today. It's Lloyd Wright. He is the president and CEO of WFYI Public Media. And you've been doing that for almost 30 years, but now you're retiring. Why did you get into broadcasting in the first place?
Yeah, all my life I've had an interest in television and radio. Probably watched way too much television as a kid, and always had an idea of working in some form of communication. And so at my high school was involved with a speech class, and that was about the limit of what you could do. And then majored in radio and television telecommunications in school, and had in mind television production. And I think at one time I thought I might like to be in front of the camera or behind the microphone, but I fell in love with TV production, and so that sent me on a career. My first job was actually with the Indiana Department of Public Instruction. Now they call it the Department of Education. And I took a job because it had broadcasting in the title, and I thought it would tide me over till that great producer job came along. And that was instructional broadcasting, the division of instructional media. And little did I know at that time that it would launch a career in educational, non-commercial media, mostly public television since the early 80s.
Yeah, it was the perfect setup. Didn't even know that. But as you mentioned, it's like 1988 you first came to FYI?
Yep.
And at that time, one TV station, one radio station. Now, 3 different channels for television, 2 HD radio, and a web. How did you navigate those changes in a very short amount of time?
Yeah.
A lot of big things happen in a short amount of time.
Yeah, we've come a long way. I remember we signed off at midnight, in those days. As you say, we were Channel 20 in an analog format. In 1970, when WFYI signed on the air, it was the only UHF station, and so people didn't even know how to tune in Channel 20 in the early 1970s. Digital came along and changed all that, and expanded the capacity for what we can do. And and again, I have to give credit to my predecessor, Frank Meek, who worked with other community leaders to acquire the radio station because it had been licensed to the Indianapolis Public Schools. Folks may remember WIAN, and in 1986, the radio station became a part of WFYI Public Television. Call letters were changed, and so since that time we've been WFYI TV and radio, and then in a digital format expanding to HD radio that offers more than we had before. So there's been a lot of growth, and then online, social media, and it just continues to change.
And during that time, in addition to running everything here, you were also on the board of PBS Board of Directors numerous years, and you chaired the Joint Licensee Group. And this is a really interesting group of stations that, like WFYI, have both radio and television. Not all of the stations do. There's a handful of them that have that. And the Public Television Major Market Group. Those are 40 of the major TV groups around the country. Mm-hmm. What did you learn from sharing with those operations that you were able to implement here at WFYI, and then vice versa? What were you able to share that you had started and things that were working well here with them?
Yeah, well, I think public media in America is sort of a patchwork quilt. There are different types of licensees: university licensees, school boards like IPS that once owned WIAN, and the vast majority of the stations are fairly small budgets and operating in smaller towns, and so a lot of small stations. So there are these affinity groups, and one of them is the Joint Licensee Group. There are 89 or 90 outlets that have both a PBS station and an NPR station, so it's a relatively small percentage overall. But just trading ideas about best practices that take place where you can take advantage of your television and radio station working together to find efficiencies. And then another affinity group within the system is the major market group, made up of the 40 largest PBS markets in the country. And again, we were involved with a variety of collaborations to create content and share best practices in fundraising and deal with some common issues in the system around revenue generation and efficiencies of a variety of kinds.
Because it's still very true. Public media, the public is an important part of that.
No doubt about it. It was true in 1969 and 70 when WFYI was trying to get on the air. Always loved the story of Ardith Burkhart leading a group of 7,000, mostly young mothers, door to door in an 8-county area to raise enough money to operate that first year in 1970. And they were going door to door talking about a new program available everywhere but Indianapolis called Sesame Street. And so it took the public then, and it's no different now. You know, close to 40% of our operating budget, which is about $12 million, comes from individual listeners and viewers, and so we rely heavily on the folks watching and listening.
The tough questions now.
Uh-oh.
Your favorite PBS TV show to watch?
I'm a big fan of what we've been able to do locally. I'll say that. I have lots of favorite programs, both on television and radio. But I think an important ingredient for WFYI and other public stations is to have impact locally. So the work that we've done, whether it's Indiana Week in Review or Curious Mix, the program that we have out now featuring Eva Moses Core and the story of the Holocaust survivor, the impact that can have in our area is probably my favorite aspect of what we do.
Thank you for all that you've done for WFYI and for our viewers at home too, and enjoy your retirement.
Thank you, Jill. I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks.
For Boomer TV, I'm Jill Dittmeyer.